The record turnout has become a big part of this election. For many, there's just too much on the line, including the question of how the U.S. will be perceived on the world stage moving forward. Samantha Power is a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under Barack Obama. Ambassador Power, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good to be here.
So this record turnout it's really remarkable watching it from here in Canada, especially during a pandemic. How significant, or what do you think, I guess, is the significance of that?
Well, people are tracking politics in the United States and all around the world in unprecedented ways and now in unprecedented numbers. So to already have 93 million people having cast ballots in the U.S., a country that's not famous for its turnout during elections, as you know, when you only had fewer than 130 million voting in 2016 gives you some testament, I think, to just the degree of engagement and enthusiasm. We've seen everything from NBA players to celebrities to the Trump campaign and their ground game, which is formidable. But really making voting salient in people's lives in a way I can't recall it happening in my lifetime, honestly. It's just the notion of vote, do your duty. Yeah. And so even, from a nonpartisan standpoint, you see a lot of players on the domestic stage engaging their kind of quasi-constituents or their followers and really trying to amp people up to get them to participate. So in terms of what it means, I think, from my standpoint as a Biden supporter, of course, I hope it means very significant youth turnout. I hope it means that the people who stayed home in 2016, which was about 7% of Obama's 2012 voters, stayed home in 2016. So I hope that whatever remorse they felt the morning after November 2016, that's now getting channeled into going back to the polls. I also think this time, just maybe last word, we did have very significant third-party influence in 2016. It was easy to overlook because it looked like such a small percentage of the vote, and of course it was. But it was enough in states like Michigan and Wisconsin to tip the balance. So I also think it's not just turnout, but it's fewer undecideds late than we had in 2016, so less likelihood of a sudden break in one direction if something were to happen between now and the closing of polls on Tuesday, but also far less interest in the third-party candidates who put themselves on the ballot. So it's a pretty clear choice between the two.
Let me ask you about what you've been concerned about over the course of Donald Trump's presidency, and I imagine continue to be, and that is the place the United States has as a global leader. Obviously, Canada and others have felt that impact, whether it be at NATO and at the United Nations. If Joe Biden does not win, are you concerned that position will never be restored? Can a different president actually turn things around here?
I think the impact would be devastating because it's not just about the United States being AWOL or turning our backs on our closest allies like Canada. It's also that the government in Beijing is making inroads in a lot of areas that are going to leave a profound mark on our planet and on our lives. And so it'd be one thing if we were just sort of ducking leadership or walking away from our commitments, our agreements, if we were just damaging U.S. standing in the world. But things don't stay still. And we've seen with China's, for example, bullying of Canada and its horrifying detention of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, just what this government is prepared to do when it feels it's not getting its way. And that's may to some around the world just look like two individuals and that may be a small issue, but it's a heartbreaking turn of events, of course, for the two men and their families, but it's also reflective of a willingness, I think, to resort to really harsh penalties when China doesn't like what it sees. And often China doesn't like what it sees when it's being held to account, held to the rule of law, held to international law, whether on an issue like Huawei or as it relates to the South China Sea or the Indian border or what it does to the Uyghurs within its own borders. So I just flagged that in the context of the U.S. election because the rules at the United Nations are, yes, they're there, they're down on paper. We have a lot of international treaties that we've built up together over these last 75 years. But you see already Beijing really seeking to chip away at both enforcement of those rules and even seeking to rewrite the rules themselves.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point, but I wonder whether a President Biden would be able to reverse those things, I guess, because they've taken up the space, and you're quite right to point it out, but could just one president and one term of a Democratic president turn things around?
Well, I don't think anybody in the Biden camp, including Vice President Biden himself, is saying that his victory would mean that we get to go back and pretend it's January 20th, 2017, right? It's going to be January 20th, 2021. And a lot has changed, as you say, and some of that space has been filled. At the same time, the United States, in many ways, in pursuing its objectives, has really been fighting, if not with one hand behind its back, maybe with both hands. I mean, the link between making progress in the international system and strengthening our alliances is inextricable. Our leverage to stand up to China, if it's the United States, the European Union, and Canada, just the Canada, the U.S., and the EU, we've got 2.5 times the amount of GDP that China brings to bear. And so for all the talk of Chinese domination, the U.S. economy is still the largest in the world. It's battered, of course, by the mishandling of COVID and just by the bad fortune for the planet of facing a pandemic. But, I think that to think about what it looks like when we actually start to stand together again, and we will have bilateral differences in a world in which Biden is elected, but the transparency, the constancy, the manners, and the domestic political space that our Democratic friends will have to cooperate with the U.S. When an American leader is trusted again, I think really can't be underestimated.
Ambassador Power, I have really 30 seconds. Any chance you would go back into an administration if there's a President Biden?
This is the only election where I think people who maybe have done public service in the past, but where we can't see beyond Tuesday. It was so harrowing. I don't know anybody who's sleeping. The stakes are so high. So what I'm doing right when I hang up with you is get out the vote and, texting people and calling people and, just being part of the campaign effort, which is where everybody's focus is. But of course, I'd love to be part of the recovery or the revival, as we've come to call it.
Okay. Thank you so much for making the time for Canada this morning. I'll let you get the vote out and we'll talk again after the election, I hope. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rosemary.